Good morning, everyone. Happy 2018. So you have to forgive me. I got up at like 5:30 this morning, so my voice is a little rough. I'm kind of all over the place, but I've actually been really sitting and getting a lot of time to reflect going into the new year, and I felt like getting on here and sharing a video just as I look into 2018. I want a reminder to myself of what I want this to look like in the coming year, and how what I've learned in 2017, how I want it to fuel what comes next. I've been sitting in a passage by Paul. He's writing a letter to one of the churches, and he makes this offhanded comment. He says, I have confidence that God will complete the work he has started in you. And for me, I have started to really cling to those verses going into 2018. 2017 has been such a refining year, and I feel so different going into 2018. I feel like God has done so much. And for me, there's this fear that comes with that of backsliding or relearning old lessons instead of going further in and learning more and being refined more this coming year. And so I cling to that. I want to feel confident in what God has done, but I also want that confidence to leak further into this coming year and what that means moving forward. And I think as Christians we can have that. The faithfulness and goodness of God means that he will continue to work and he will continue to pull you in, and that it's not the same lesson over and over and over again, but it's a refining process that can be completed, right? So as I reflect over this last year, I'm realizing that there have been certain themes or certain things that I've been learning about. For example, 2017 was a theme for me of joy and learning what the joy of God looks like and how to get the joy of God. And that joy isn't happiness, and joy isn't perfection, and joy isn't all these things that I think I had kind of related to joy, but it's this deep and rich thing that kind of comes out of a confidence and a thankfulness in God. And I'm realizing that all these different spiritual words of hope and trust and faith and thankfulness and praise and grace and joy and humility, all these words that we throw around, for me, they're starting to collide. They're all beginning. It's like when you have one, you begin to have them all. And it's like an opening of a Pandora's box. And that's been kind of, I don't think I expected that, right? I was like, oh, like I'm going to dive into joy, and then I'll probably have to dive in and just keep adding to that as time goes on. But for me, it's like floodgates have been opened, and all of a sudden I'm discovering them all at once. And they all are interconnected, and if I have one, I have them all. Which, as I think about the presence of God and I think about him and who he is, I guess that kind of makes sense. But I'm a little blown away, and it's a little overwhelming. But I'm realizing that it all becomes rooted in the presence of God, right? He is what brings those things. And when I become filled with him, all of a sudden it's all of these things happening. And it's all of these things pouring out. And I've been sitting in that, right? How to remain rooted in that. I discovered a psalm a while back, probably a month or two ago, that I've really just kind of been meditating on. And it's David, and he's talking about making God the rock of his habitation. And obviously I love the imagery of the rock anyway. There's parables about building on a solid rock so that when the storms come, it talks about all of these things around a firm foundation and building on that. But something about that psalm jumped out to me, this idea of Jesus being the rock of my habitation. And Sometimes I think I climb back on the rock when storms hit. Like God brings storms just because all of a sudden I realize I need him and I climb back on and I try to cling. But I'm realizing the blessings and how life changes when I learn to habitate in Jesus as my rock. When I learn how to dig and weave my fingers deeper and deeper into this rock, when I learn to use it as my shield, when it's my buffer, when it's my stronghold, when it's my home, and how that can consistently shift things day in and day out in my approach to life. And that's when this floodgate of all these amazing blessings start to come. It's been this really intricate dance for me as I learn about God and I experience who he is, and I learn to habitate on the rock of him and nothing else, right? And I start breaking off and taking away these other things that I used to rely on. It makes me smaller. I become to take myself less and less seriously and become more and more aware of just how small I am. But it's not this degrading thing. It's this incredibly empowering thing, right? All of this power and confidence and joy start to just explode in my life. And it makes no sense from an earthly standard because I become more and more aware of my weaknesses. When you come close to the presence of God, you can not help but become more and more aware of all the ways that you fall short. You become painfully aware of your need for his grace. And yet it's not degrading. It's actually the most invigorating and empowering thing I think I've ever had, I've ever experienced. And so I came across this quote by Chris Volodin. My friend actually posted it on Facebook, and I find it kind of profound. It says, "Humility is not a feeling bad about yourself or thinking you are little, insignificant, or anything else demeaning. True humility begins with remembering the source of your greatness, the King of Heaven. The truth of God's grace humbles a man without degrading him, and exalts a man without inflating him." And as I look into 2018, that's the life that I want to build on. This is Kira. Say good morning, honey. I got this image in my head, or this metaphor. I was talking to a friend the other night. It's as if we were... So I should preface this with saying, and if you are a cheerleader, I apologize in advance, okay? Because this is not meant to be a dig. But growing up, I was never a cheerleader, and that was never really a goal, right? I always liked the people who were on the court playing the game. And I kind of got this image in my head of sometimes I think when we're not making Jesus the rock of our habitation, I think we get into this place of trying to become the star player and doing everything we can and training and working hard, and any weakness that crops up or any failure to deliver on the court, we immediately jump into like action and training, and there's panic and there's threat, right? This is going to threaten my ability to perform on the court for God. And so I've got to fix that, and I've got to train harder or do this or do that. And there are times of injury, and then I'm on the bench and I'm frustrated and whatever. And I think we've approached it the wrong way. I think humility and making God the rock of your habitation means that I become very, very painfully aware that I am a cheerleader on the sidelines watching God do his thing. And as I watch, and as I learn to sit back in my life, and as I learn to step back and stand in my rightful place, that game just takes off, right? With God as the point guard, the game looks way different in a good way. And I find myself like desperately trying to stay on the sidelines. And the more I see God work, and the more I see his timing, and the more I see him like sink threes time after time after time, I become more and more like, don't pass me the ball. You do you go. Like, I'm going to like wave my pom-pom over here. Like, go you. And I end up in this humble place of praising God for who he is and just excited to see him show up game after game after game. And I become pretty comfortable in my cheerleader status. And I was feeling really confident in that metaphor. I was like, this is great. Like, this is like God is my rock of my habitation, right? This is like, how do I posture my life so it's about him showing up and him being the star and me just like staying on the sidelines and staying out of the way. But I also realize that that might be a little too degrading. That the true humility that God brings and truly being humble in God's greatness, the grace of the gospel message is that we have a God that can go out and be the 3-point shooter, and yet he chooses to inhabit us. Guys, the Christian walk, I'm realizing it's not sitting on the sidelines as much as it is a 3-point shooter, point guard, star athlete coming and inhabiting a cheerleader and pulling them out on the court and letting them shoot the winning shot. And it's the humility that comes with realizing that the power of Christ is in me, and that requires action and motion that I do not deserve and that is not of me. And yet it is freeing and it is beautiful and it is awe-inspiring every time. And I'm currently living in a life where God has shown up. And I am currently living in a life where I am so painfully aware that this is not me. I want 2018 to be a continuation of living a life that honors and habitates and channels and taps into the power that is in me. That honors the God who has decided and chosen to use me even though I am not deserving. I want to leave you with, two things. So I think there was a time in my life that I didn't have this perspective right. And there was so much anxiety. And it was like anytime a weakness cropped up, it was like panic and it was threatening, right? Because I was trying to please God out of my own strength. That was something that had to be dealt with immediately and squashed and attacked and silenced. And now things begin to shift, and I'm no longer in this place where I think it has anything to do with I'm fully aware of my weaknesses because I'm sitting in the presence of God every day. And so when other people become aware of my weaknesses, I'm like, yeah, that's yes. And then, but it's not just like this flippant, like, take me or leave me. I'm not perfect. It's more of a like, I trust that God is continuing to refine me and that we are continuing to work on those things. And it's like this peaceful, okay, God, what are we going to do about that? How can I let that be worked out with you? How can your spirit come in and heal that? Because that's not good and that's not the goal, but it's true. And so it's just taking the panic and the anxiety out of the equation. So I want to leave you with 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 6 and 7. I've been sitting in these verses for multiple months, and they are so good. And they are so simple, but this wraps up what I'm trying to say. This wraps up what I want. This is what I want for 2018. And if I can maintain this posture, I feel confident that God can continue to complete the work that he started in me. And the verses say this. They say, therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your cares upon him, because he cares for you. In a different version, I think it's the Message, it says, be carefree before God, for he is so careful with you. I pray that in 2018 you guys also can experience the power and the confidence and the peace that comes with God as the rock of your habitation. That as you begin to claim and buffer and realize the carefulness of God in your life and how much he cares for you, that it would be a foundation that would launch you into a place where you are no longer threatened by the things that need refining, but you can engage in that journey with him, and that you can experience his power and his healing in a new way this coming year. Happy 2018.